this is going to be, we said last week with Bill Klein and Karen talking to us about eco-theology, that care for the climate, care for our planet, care for each other and the future of the planet could hardly be a more important topic for religious people, ethical people, good people to undertake, because it is indeed truly an existential crisis. And so happy today to have Richard and Lisa. Richard being I've forgotten your executive director of resource. For
sustainability.
For sustainability. I knew that one time. I knew it 3 or 4 days ago. And then Lisa is director of archives, things at the Baker, at the Fondren Library at Baker Institute. at Rice University. I need to remember now that Baker Institute's not the only thing at Rice.
I lead digital scholarship and also Fondren's Dream Team.
Well, you're Kelvin's adult education committee, part of that dream team as well. So you're on our dream team for sure. Appreciate so much the many suggestions you give. So we came to hear you. So take it away.
Well, thanks so much. And thanks so much to Bill for providing a really great foundation for today. Yeah. We wanted to start by actually asking you all what's at stake for you with regards to climate change. Like for me, I'm concerned about the natural disasters that we're encountering now. I'm concerned about the future of my children and of, somewhat selfishly, chocolate and coffee. So if you could shout out or put in the chat what's at stake for you, we'd love to kind of ground this in your own concerns about climate change.
And maybe to control the chaos, you can raise your hand if you'd like to jump in with a comment.
Or again, just type something in chat.
Who's going to go first? Oh, Laura. And then I see David.
So I'm, not from here. And I'm concerned that here isn't going to continue to be habitable. So in addition to worries for my own children, and what the world they're inheriting is going to be like, I'm worried about how long we can live in our city.
Yeah. And so we saw David, and then Beth, and I think John had his hand up too.
I'm concerned about mass extinction. I'm a biologist by training, and trees can't migrate to cooler climates. And the other plants can't do that very well either. And as the climate warms rapidly, there's not going to be a chance for their seeds to get far enough north to escape the heat. Right. And of course, the animals that depend on those plants will have the same trouble. So I am really worried about that. I heard a report on NPR this morning about the lobster fishery in the Gulf of Maine and how that is currently very active, but the water is warming up enough that they know it's not going to last.
Yeah.
I would say, in addition to property loss from major events, I would say trauma. And I was personally flooded out of my home, but even if that hasn't happened to you, witnessing it from a safe place or being stuck in your home because the streets are flooded everywhere and seeing it on the news, just this feed of horrible scenes here and other places, I think it creates trauma for us. And then we're afraid the flip side of that is that maybe it'll get through to more people if more people experience major weather events.
And we had John and then Susan and then Bill, and then we might need to move on after that. John?
Oh, mute. Yeah,
there you go.
Yep. Am I on?
Yep.
I love our national parks. And I was disturbed last week to read that 13% of the entire population of giant sequoias in the world have been extirpated due to the fires. And we haven't seen the worst of it yet. So that distresses me.
Yeah. Susan.
I'm worried about our ability to grow enough food. And I'm also, part of that is the population of the world. The human population of the world is just too big.
Yeah.
Just too big. And I know it has slowed down quite a lot. Birth control measures have been instituted in a lot of parts of the world, but anyway, I believe that is the root of the problem.
It's just too darn many of us.
Yeah.
And Bill, you're on mute. There you go.
When I was growing up, my father was in the agricultural business, and so drought was pronounced drought then, but drought was a big thing. And during the 50s, the 7-year drought, which there's a book called "The Time It Never Rained," and so I grew up very sensitive to when there's not rain, and it's one of the reasons that we have rainwater system in Wimberley, which to protect what we can and not draw any more out of the aquifer. But when I see those pictures of the ground just cracks and big cracks and people walking across, it just really tears at me to think, you got to have water. You simply have to have water. I know we got lots of it out there that's so far not potable, but the water system, loss bothers me a great deal.
And we have a lot of excellent comments here in the chat. Anne, Tim, Laura, Bill, and Laura's reminding us that the impacts of climate change typically fall most heavily on those who have been historically disenfranchised and have the least ability to protect themselves from those.
Yeah. I think in the interest of time, we should probably move on. But I think this has provided an important context for thinking about the importance of solving these issues. We wanted to start by talking a little bit about what brought us to this work. So I'll let Richard go first because he was sort of the pioneer in our family.
Well, I started out my career as a highway engineer, which was the wrong place for me. And I knew right away that that was not my calling. And so I did a lot of soul searching and reading to think about what I should actually be doing with my life. And I decided to go to graduate school in urban planning. And it was there that I was able to bring together my professional interest and my interest in the environment. And as good fortune would have it, the dean of the School of Architecture at University of Virginia, where I was going to graduate school, was one of the leading green architects and green designers in the world. His name was William McDonough. And I got to be his teaching assistant, and it basically changed my future trajectory forever. So I've been in and around these issues for most of the past quarter century or so.
And I sort of absorbed environmental concern like good secondhand smoke from Richard. But also, seeing Al Gore talk about climate change in the early 2000s was alarming. And I did some stuff after that, but really not enough. And then came back to it after the election in 2016, and then especially after Hurricane Harvey. So since then, I helped the library develop a sustainability plan and launched our green team. And the library recently won a grant to support its work around climate resilience, which has connected us to the larger community in Houston doing this work as well. So that's a quick snapshot of what brought us to this work. Today, we'd like to really focus on thinking about sort of the most impactful practical solutions to addressing climate change. But, to echo what we talked about just a moment ago, we want to just shine a light on what's at stake right now.
Yeah. So this is sort of like the where we are here moment. Since the start of the Industrial Revolution, we've had an average of 1 degree Celsius of warming already on the planet. And experts typically point to the 1.5 degrees Celsius mark as being kind of a threshold where once you pass that, you hit a lot of tipping points where we go from sort of bad things starting to happen, as many of you have illustrated in the comments already, to things getting a whole lot worse. And then 2 degrees Celsius is where you start to get into the dystopian scenarios. So this means that we have basically a 0.5 degree left of wiggle room. There are pathways for achieving that, for staying under that 0.5 degree. The recent report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, says that if we reduce our emissions by 45% between now and 2030, that can limit the temperature rise so that we stay within that 1.5 degree envelope. So that's just kind of to give you a sense of where we are. We need to act now, but we can still make it.
Right. So the good news is that there are solutions available. And I think this quotation from the Union of Concerned Scientists really captures that. Like, we have the technologies and the science, but we do need the leadership and the collective action to transform our society and address this critical challenge. So Dr. Leah Stokes has this nice framework for thinking about different spheres of action with regards to climate change. There's the personal sphere. So that could include, for example, deciding to purchase your electricity for your home from renewable sources. Or it could be the community sphere, looking at getting your workplace to acquire its own electricity from renewable sources. Or up at the policy scale, it could be advocating for federal clean electricity standards. And Leah Stokes reminds us, like, you don't have to achieve perfection at the personal level to really have these sort of larger effects. It's good to work at all these levels in advocating for climate action. So you want to talk about Project Drawdown?
Well, there's a wonderful group that has put together what I think is kind of the handbook for the next 10 years. And that book is called Project Drawdown. In fact, I can reach across the table and point it out to you right now. But a lot of this information is on the website that you see, drawdown.org. And they literally provide line item by line item different solutions and the impact that they'll have. So Lisa has just clicked on scenario 2, which is how do we limit warming to no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius? And then they list their modeling of different solutions and what that impact could have in limiting, increasing emissions. So we see here that the biggest thing we can do is onshore wind turbines, followed by large installations of solar. Reducing food waste is number 3. Plant-rich diets, number 4. And it goes on and on. So if you're wondering, well, what is it that we should be doing? I view Project Drawdown as being a wonderful go-to source. And the remarkable thing is, even though this book only came out, I want to say 4 years ago, so many more solutions are being added to the list and increasing in scale, and that continues to happen. So it's sort of a reason to be hopeful. But if you like to dive into the details and the data, it's a great source. Lisa?
So what we thought we would do now for just a few minutes is kind of collectively go through a little quiz on the most impactful climate solutions that comes from Project Drawdown. I need to just shift things around here. So this was put together by CNN. And if you want to follow along yourself, I'll go ahead and put into the chat a link to this quiz. But we'll do it together. And can you all see the CNN page right now? Yes.
Yep. Okay,
great. So we'll start, and it asks you to rank the solutions here. So we'll start in the food area. And since we're sharing our screen, we can't really see many people very well. So if you all, we'll go for a bit of chaos here, or you can put into the chat.
Let's embrace the chaos.
Okay. Which of these solutions you think has the most impact? Eating a plant-rich diet, plant-heavy diet, composting your waste, throwing away less food, or cooking over a clean stove. So what would do the most to lower carbon emissions?
First. I'm with Ann, number one.
Okay, plant-heavy diet, number one. Okay.
Karen?
Oh,
you're on mute.
I would say number one.
Okay.
Also.
Yep, number one.
Okay. How about what would come second?
Number three.
Three.
Composting.
I'll just, just for argument's sake.
Okay, so some controversy here, composting versus throwing away. What do other people think? Where does composting fit here?
Well, we had some who thought we should maybe flip those around.
Okay, let's see. And cooking over clean stoves?
I guess that falls last for everyone else.
Well, that is a big one for the third world, for the developing world.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that it is so much for us.
Well, let's just see how we did here. Okay. And I always get these answers wrong too, even though I know this stuff pretty well. So throwing away less food is number one, according to this list. Eating a plant-rich diet, second. Clean stoves, third. And composting, fourth. And so this quiz also covers areas like transportation, urban design and home design, land use, electricity use. Maybe we'll do this one too.
Sure.
So our four choices here to put into order are harness wind energy on land.
Well, except we've already kind of seen the results of this by looking at the table of solutions.
Yeah. Okay. Should we go down to the last one?
Yeah. Oh, actually, but we just...
Well, it's a refresher.
Okay. It's a refresher.
So our choices here are install onshore wind turbines, restore our tropical forest, manage refrigeration chemicals, eat more plants and less meat, and cut down on food waste. So how would we order these?
Keep 1-1 and move 4 to 2.
Okay. Anything else?
I think it's 5 to 2 because we just did those two together.
Oh yeah, 5 to 2.
Okay. What about the refrigeration chemicals?
I put that one.
I think forests are pretty important.
Yeah.
Where would we put that?
I'd put it probably third. Maybe third.
Okay, let's see how we do here. Oh, does anyone else want to throw in?
Well, I was going to say eating more plants and less meat transitions to raising fewer eatable animals, and all the result of the animal industrialization.
Mm-hmm.
So
you would bump that up?
Well, I don't know. I just think it's important.
Yeah, and all these things are important. So these are the top 5. So they all rank high. In the interest of time, let's go ahead and reveal the answers here. So manage refrigeration chemicals is number 1, and then onshore wind turbines. And then, food waste would be number 3, more plants, less meat, number 4, and tropical forest, number 5. But again, all very important. So thank you for playing along with the quiz here. And we encourage you to check out Project Drawdown to dive more deeply into these different climate solutions. It's, for me, a pretty hopeful exercise to show there are ways that we can actually solve this problem. We just, again, need the collective will.
Can you see our slides now?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay, great.
So let's talk about the sort of community approach to addressing climate change. And I'm going to use here, since we're talking to a faith community, the example of actions by churches, particularly Baptist churches and the Alliance of Baptist and American Baptist Churches. There's a group that the Alliance of Baptists belongs to called Creation Justice Ministries that really focuses on education and advocacy around climate change. And it involves many Christian congregations. There's also a group called the Creation Justice Network, which, among other things, has a certification program for churches that want to be certified as sort of green churches. And then there's also a group called Communities Responding to Extreme Weather, which is really focused on building the sort of social infrastructure to help communities get through extreme weather events like heat waves or cold snaps or hurricanes. And there are different levels of engagement, which go from education to providing warming and heating centers to being shelters. My library actually is, I think, the only crew center right now in Houston, but there are opportunities for churches and libraries and other organizations to get involved as well. And I bring up these examples partly, honestly, to prod Covenant to think through how it might respond collectively to climate change. I don't have the answer myself. I just want to throw out some options. So we talked about sort of working at a sort of congregational or a sort of larger level, but we could also look at a local level. So there's a group in Houston called Interfaith Environmental Network that has done some advocacy, for example, in front of city council, and also organizes educational events around climate change and environmental issues. And I can see some advantages to working at a local level rather than a sort of larger faith-based level to sort of address the local issues. We also wanted to talk about policy because right now is actually a critical time for climate policy. It's hard to keep track of all these bills around climate policy and infrastructure that are working their way through Congress, but there's a really critical bill being considered right now, the $3.5 trillion budget reconciliation bill that includes a hefty section on climate. And many people believe this is sort of our big chance to act, not only to ensure that the U.S. makes real progress towards addressing climate change, but to position the U.S. to have more influence at the upcoming climate talks in Scotland. So the Biden administration has committed itself to reducing carbon emissions pretty dramatically. As we saw at the beginning, we really need to do by 2030. So a 50 to 52% reduction was announced on Earth Day, at least plans for that. But we need the policy to back up those plans. So this is a pretty confusing chart here that was prepared by Chuck Schumer's office, showing the different components of climate action in this budget reconciliation bill. And you'll see that the biggest part is for the sort of clean energy policy here. Also some incentives around clean vehicles and a methane fee. So there's again 150 billion included to incentivize utilities to switch to renewables, and other things that are apparently under consideration is like a carbon fee that the Senate is looking at, and these things are still really in flux. Although I've heard that a vote is expected soon, perhaps as early as Monday. So here's where the call to action comes. I would really encourage you to contact your senators and House rep as soon as possible. And there's an easy way to do this. If you visit callforclimate.com, it gives you a phone number to call and will connect you to your two senators and your congressional rep. And you also have an easy to follow script. I did this on Friday. It took me less than 10 minutes. Honestly, I talked to, like I just gave messages when I called Cornyn and Cruz's office and spoke to a very nice woman in Lizzie Fletcher's office. The most annoying part for me was having to listen to Ted Cruz's voice telling me that he cared about my opinion. But, I was willing to go with that. There's also a group called Interfaith Power and Light that organizes people from a more kind of faith-based approach. And if you, like me, think like this really hinges on Senator Manchin, who is heavily invested in the fossil fuel industry, you can join a phone bank to encourage West Virginia voters to call Senator Manchin on climate. So to exercise a little bit of influence there. Let's go to the state level now, and I'm going to ask Richard to explain this one because I'll pitch in too. But remember, and I'm sure you can't forget the winter storm and the ways in which some conservatives said that renewables were really the reason why this all happened, and Governor Abbott in July sent a letter to the Public Utility Commission basically saying that the market for electricity in Texas should be reshaped to favor more reliable sources of power like natural gas, coal, and nuclear power.
And in fact, you may have seen the news item earlier this week that a federal agency had completed its review of the February freeze and pointed, of course, that the issue was not wind turbines freezing up, but rather lots of issues with weatherization, and pointing in particular to issues with weatherization related to natural gas facilities, and basically kind of calling out the governor for giving a misleading representation of what was at fault. But sort of the big deal is that right now the rules of the electricity marketplace in Texas are being rewritten. There's actually a lot of renewable projects in the pipeline right now in Texas. That's a reason to be very optimistic. And my fear is that the market will be changed in such a way that it will grind these to a halt. But I'm not exactly sure what's being proposed. It's a bit of a black box to me. So Lisa's about to tell you to get involved.
Right. So the Public Utility Commission is, again, considering rewriting the rules and in collaboration with ERCOT. They've been having these hearings. They've said that they will issue new rules in mid-December. So there's still an opportunity to hopefully influence this process to make sure that renewables are not at a disadvantage when it comes to the energy marketplace. Like, it's really important for climate reasons as well as for sort of larger reliability and economic reasons to have a diverse mix and to make sure that renewables play a strong role in Texas's energy marketplace. So if you want the easy approach, Texas Campaign for the Environment has a letter that you can send to the Public Utility Commission just by visiting the website. You could write to the Public Utility Commissioner, who seems fairly reasonable in a lot of the interviews he's given, but I don't know. And then there are different organizations that are really pushing to make sure that renewables aren't disadvantaged. Like the Environmental Defense Fund has a Texas office and joined a lot of other environmental organizations in filing a letter with the Public Utility Commission. Let's talk now about Houston. And as was mentioned at the beginning, we know that climate change and environmental issues have a greater impact on people of color. So this chart kind of captures the ways in which air quality leads to more, poor air quality leads to more asthma, particularly among Black and Latino communities, and the same with extreme temperature. And we know this in Houston, which has really been one of the central cities for the environmental justice movement, partly because Dr. Robert Bullard, who is kind of attributed as being the father of environmental justice, is here in Houston, and because of our status as an energy city, means that a lot of poor communities are located close to industrial facilities that produce really poor air quality and other environmental hazards. One community that I've come to know somewhat is Pleasantville, which was one of the first Black planned communities in Houston and has like a strong tradition of civic pride and civic engagement. It's located close to the ship channel. It's located close to the highways. So it has a history of environmental challenges. Like in the mid 90s, 4 chemical plants caught on fire and like burned repeatedly over a month, leading to like significant air quality problems. They also got hit really hard by Hurricane Harvey and the flooding that resulted, and have some real problems with air quality. And coming soon, the ship channel is due to be widened, and there's a lot of concern that old diesel engines, some dating back, I think, to like the 50s, on these like dredges, will be used to widen the ship channel, which will release nitrogen oxide, which contributes to problems with asthma and particulates, which have their own health effects. So it's, I think, important to pressure the port to try to make this process as clean as possible. So some ways that you can promote climate justice locally, there are several like excellent local organizations that are working in this area. There's a group called ACTS, which is based in Pleasantville, that has really been leading the way in getting air quality monitors installed in the area so that the community can itself keep track of air quality. And we've worked at the library with them on an educational initiative at Holland Middle School around air quality monitoring. There's a group called SEER that is bringing together different environmental justice groups and offering training and organizing them to really push for change. And the Healthy Port Communities Coalition has also been doing a lot of education and advocacy around environmental justice. And once again, there are these different levels to approach this problem at. So at the federal level, the Biden administration has committed to allocating 40% of climate-related funding and environmental funding to these fence-line communities as part of this Justice 40 initiative. So it's important to make sure that promise is kept. The Texas Commission on Environmental Quality is known for being really lax around punishing polluters and enforcing environmental laws, and they really need to step it up. I believe like in 2019, only like 3% of emission events were led to a fine. And then at the local level, I think it's important to push the port to use cleaner equipment as part of this process of, renewing the ship channel. And also just to get behind communities in their own efforts, like with the air quality monitoring. So now comes the sort of interactive part. So there's a wonderful podcast called How to Save a Planet, which is co-hosted, until recently, co-hosted by Alex Bloomberg and Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson. And Johnson has this really great climate action Venn diagram to help people figure out, where do I fit in terms of this movement? And so the three components of this Venn diagram are: what brings you joy, what are you good at, and what is the work that needs doing? And at the intersection of those three circles comes what you should do. So if you could take out your pen and or pencil and paper and just kind of take a few minutes to work through your own climate action Venn diagram. I'll show you mine really quickly. My talent is not drawing circles. I am not good at drawing circles or really being neat. But I decided, I do like, as a librarian, synthesizing information. I love trying to build community, and I think we need collective action. So that's sort of oriented a lot of my work in this space. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and give you all a second to draw your own Venn diagrams here. Okay, well, thank you for participating in that exercise. You may not have had time to perfect your climate action Venn diagrams, but would anyone be interested in kind of sharing their initial thoughts here?
I'll give it a shot. Under what needs doing, I put a big circle that said behavioral changes.
Okay.
And that could be the whole world, hopefully, but more likely the people close to me. People close to me that maybe haven't thought about as much as I have. Under my areas of giftedness, I wrote writing and communicating. I like organizing things and writing them down and communicating. And what brings me joy is producing something that is kind of a legacy item or can be archived. Seeing papers I've written in the library brings me great joy. Yeah. And especially if I look at citations and see somebody has actually read this stuff, that thrills me. And so under action items, I thought of things like teaching, creating examples, blogging, just continuing the communication, not only that this is important, that this is possible.
I like the way you put that, important and possible. Yeah. Thanks.
That's excellent.
Anyone else?
I would put in a plug for the Interfaith Environmental Network in Houston, because it gives you, they used to, I don't know what they've done since the pandemic, but have regular meetings with people working on various issues, like going to grocery stores and trying to talk them into buying the right kind of refrigerant for storing their vegetables, buying old vegetables where you can get those that are perfectly good to eat. And, just all levels of things people can do, and different people are connected with different groups doing those things. So it's keeping in touch with groups that can continually educate you about what's possible and give you options, I think is important. And they're connected up with the Texas Environmental Network, and lobbyists and people like that come to talk from time to time, of excellent people that always need volunteers. So, I just want to put in my word for that, because that's right here in Houston. And they have, I think, at least a monthly newsletter, if not more often. They let you know what's going on, more often than monthly.
Renee, tell us the name again of that group.
Interfaith Environmental Network. Charlie Burroughs' wife has been very instrumental in that group for a long time. Getting it started and participating.
Thank you. That's great to hear. I'm only a little bit familiar with them, so I'm glad to learn more.
It was like 4 years ago that they had a seminar on Drawdown, and that book is being looked at everywhere now. But, they provide, So.
Great. So we saw hands from Anne and then Beth.
Beth, go ahead.
Okay, this will be fairly modest, but you know that I love to garden. And I know from the readings I've done, not directly related to gardening, that we really are so much more interconnected with our environment than we recognize. It's not a hobby. We actually benefit from seeing and being around plants. It's healing. And the church color garden is really, I was asked to expand it by the building committee, as our new building is going up. And a lot of the plants attract the butterflies and the bees, and now we have hummingbirds. So that just brings me a lot of joy. Responsible recycling, it is a minuscule part of our environmental work, but I do work on that on my own. I'm discouraged to find out that a lot of it's super hard to avoid plastics in grocery shopping. And that a lot of plastics are, in fact, even though we put them in the recycling bin, maybe they're not actually being recycled. And that is hard to learn, but I'll keep at it. And I think it was really one or two people at Covenant, fronted by Joyce Courtois, who kept saying, let's not use disposable plastic plates and forks and whatever at our meal gatherings. So we moved to washable ones. That's a small thing, but significant. Mm-hmm. And then for me, my weak point is advocacy. I don't take the time to write or call. So I could work on that personally.
Thanks for sharing.
That's a great response. Yeah. And Anne.
This is almost more of a question, but I feel like it's the thing when I make my Venn diagram, helping others and nature and God are what brings me joy. The work that needs doing is education, system change, and simple solutions. I added to that behavioral changes. And then what am I good at? Questioning, one-on-one conservation, spreading hope, listening, organizing, and writing. And one big question I've been asking is, given that we now are worried about artificial intelligence, why can't there be a program or something where I've decided that I want to buy imperfect foods because that helps cut down on food waste, which we saw was a big problem. But I need to know really if the transportation of that particular box to my home from its source is really helping or harming. It can make me feel really good, but I really don't know if that's a true solution. And I think there are so many feel-good actions that we can all do, and we still don't really know the big impacts. And it's impossible for me to believe that that's not discoverable. And maybe there's a new transparency, just like we now have transparency on any item we purchase, transparency on websites in terms of where is it sourced from? What's the delivery footprint? Because I think without that information, we can do a lot of things that feel good and really be doing more harm than good. And I still do those things because, again, I think it makes me feel good, but I feel like I'm doing it in a vacuum. And I think until we start asking that question more, we are potentially more part of the problem.
And that's a wonderful comment, and it reminds me of one time a friend who lives way out by Katy was telling me she took the time to bring a bunch of bottles to be recycled at the recycling facility in West U, and I was thinking, oh my God, the emissions from just driving, just to do that. There's a wonky phrase called life cycle assessment. That means that you look at sort of the entire range of impacts associated with an act or something that you're doing. And you're very right. At the consumer scale, it's sometimes it's hard to know what's the best. You have to, because there's too much that you have to know. How did this thing get from point A to point B? Was it a train? Was it a truck? Was it a ship? What was going on at the factory and all those kinds of things. We've actually, for one of our building projects at Rice, we engaged with an engineer who was conducting a life cycle assessment of different sort of major impact things, helping us with choices of materials where we knew enough of the details where we could use that tool to make decisions. And it helped us choose one building material over another. And it helped us to think about, how to adjust the mix of the concrete that we were using and things like that. But you're right, that kind of capability, if it could get down to the consumer scale and really help you make decisions in the moment, that would be so much better, because otherwise we might unintentionally do something that has a worse impact, thinking that we're doing something with a better impact.
So I see we're almost out of time. So we have just a few more thoughts to share here. And then we'll also share the slides and a list of resources if you'd like to explore these topics further. So in terms of next steps, and some of you are probably already doing this or beyond this, but I would encourage you all, if you're curious, to find different ways to get informed. And I highly recommend this book called All We Can Save, which is an anthology of women writing about the climate crisis and climate solutions. It brings together scientists and activists and artists to really think through solutions to the climate crisis. There are also a number of great climate newsletters. I'm particularly fond of Bill McKibben's newsletter and some fantastic podcasts on climate solutions, including How to Save a Planet. Also, I think, as was mentioned, participating in community can be very valuable as a way of broadening your own perspective, of having a deeper impact, and of sort of having the motivation to continue doing this work through being, part of this larger effort. So there are many climate organizations, a few that I'll just point out. I've been involved with Citizens Climate Lobby for 3 or 4 years now, which is looks for sort of bipartisan solutions, specifically a carbon tax and dividend, and brings people to meet with their congressional representatives. There's also a great organization called 350.org that takes a global approach to climate solutions. And Bill McKibben is starting a new organization called Third Act that is focused on climate action by people over 60. So kind of a complement to the Sunrise Movement, which is quite youth focused. So as a concluding thought, I really like this quotation from Emily Atkin, who has her own climate newsletter, which speaks to the importance of societal transformation, and how quickly society transforms depends on how many people demand it. And the most harmful lie being spread about climate change today is not that it's fake, it's that you can do nothing, that's nothing you can do can help save the world. So we will end there. I know we don't have a ton of time, but we're happy to answer questions or hear her comments. And I will share a lengthy link to the slides and also to a list of resources if you want to find out more about what we've been discussing.
I feel the long arm of Bill Martin reaching out to us.
No. Carry on with this. This has been great, and it still is. I was reaching over to look because I have the wrong set of glasses, so I'm looking closely to see the link there. So.
Beth, I saw your hand go up.
Yes, so this could be for another session, obviously, but I wonder how much of a knowledge base is out there about how we can change our personal investment. Where do we put our money to invest and save for retirement and so forth?
Yeah, How to Save a Planet had 2 episodes on that very topic.
Okay.
So that might be a good place to start.
Good.
And the good news is that, especially over the last 5 years or so, funds that are oriented around issues of environment and social related issues and just good corporate governance have performed quite well. So you're not by any way making a sacrifice in order to try to invest with your values. And it stands to reason that those corporations that think about these things are more oriented towards thinking about what are the risks that could be facing them. It's a sign of good planning.
And you can just ask your financial advisor, if you have one, tell them you want to invest in socially responsible stocks, and they'll give you a nice talk about it.
But I had an interesting experience with that because I've had the same one for many years, and he's somewhat older than I. And his response was, I think you're best off getting as much on your return as possible from any source and then donate to things that, organizations you're interested in. Now his sons are involved in the company, and they're in their 30s, and they're all over the ESG funds. So in a generation, the attitude toward it has changed.
That's correct.
And we've had ours that way for the last 10 years, and we've done super well. I mean, we get comments from people both wanting to know how we do it, and then thinking it's not wise, but so far it's been worth it. And that's all I can say. It's a hard decision sometimes when you're thinking about your future, but
yeah.
Well, I know we're pretty much out of time, but thank you for your active participation. And I hope that this conversation continues.
And I just want to again recognize Bill for kicking it off last week and giving us sort of the seamless transition into this week. So it was a pleasure following you, Bill, in this, and we look forward to continuing the dialogue with our dear community.
Thank you. Thank you so much.